Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're diving into this really fascinating truth. You know the world's most famous sports? Well, they weren't meticulously planned out in some lab by scientists. Nope. They were actually born from pure accident, a whole lot of boredom, and just raw creativity. We're going to explore the totally surprising, and honestly sometimes hilarious, origins of the games that millions of us play and watch every single day. Let's get right into it. Think about it for a second. Who really invented your favorite sport? I mean, you might naturally assume that elite athletes or, I don't know, biomechanics experts design these complex games with perfect physics in mind. But the real creators? They were literally just regular communities, everyday students and families who were simply trying to have a bit of fun or solve a problem. They definitely weren't trying to create massive Olympic events. They were just trying to cure a boring afternoon.
And the crazy part is that these massive global phenomenons were heavily improvised, which just means they were made using whatever materials happened to be lying around. These pioneers, they didn't have fancy sporting goods stores down the street. They built these games out of absolutely whatever they could find in their houses, their schools, or their backyards. Just pure, on-the-fly invention.
Which brings us to our first section, the games nobody planned.
Seriously, these sports just popped up all over the map. We're talking everywhere from the freezing landscapes of 19th century Canada, which gave us ice hockey, to an 1891 gymnasium in Massachusetts where basketball was born. And right across the Atlantic, England was busy giving the world both table tennis and rugby. It's wild to think these started as just simple little ideas in very specific communities, and then grew to reach literally millions of people.
Moving on to section 2, driven by the elements.
You see, when folks were faced with some really harsh environments, like frozen lakes and snowy mountains, they just naturally adapted. People living in those freezing cold regions started playing stick and ball games right on the ice, which, as we know, eventually became ice hockey. Meanwhile, those massive snowy slopes birthed snowboarding over in the USA in the 1960s and 70s. The environment literally dictated the game they played. Nature forced their hand in the best way possible.
But hey, on the flip side, what about the heat? Well, the warm, sunny, sandy beaches out in California naturally inspired the creation of beach volleyball back in the 1920s. It just goes to show that human beings will absolutely always figure out a way to play. It doesn't matter what kind of terrain or crazy weather they're dealing with.
Okay, I have to share this because the early reality of basketball is just hilarious. When James Naismith invented it in 1891 as an indoor winter escape, he used a soccer ball and 2 actual literal peach baskets. And here's the kicker, because the bottoms of the baskets were still intact, players literally had to climb a ladder to fetch the ball out after every single score. Seriously, imagine stopping a fast-paced NBA game today just to drag out a ladder. Too funny. All right, let's jump into section 3. Everyday objects turned sports.
Take table tennis, for example. This was born in 1880s England just as some simple indoor fun. Players literally set up rows of books straight across a dining room table to act as the net. Then they just grabbed random household objects to use as paddles. I mean, think about that. A game that started with people smacking a ball over literature is now a highly intense, super competitive Olympic sport.
And speaking of raiding the kitchen for sporting goods, over in the USA during the 1940s and 50s, people just started throwing empty pie tins around for fun. Literally just empty metal baking tins. But this super simple act of tossing a tin through the air eventually evolved into the invention of the plastic flying discs that we all know today as the Frisbee. It's crazy how great ideas so often begin with the absolute simplest, most mundane materials.
Then again, sometimes a game completely changes just because someone decides, you know what, I'm going to ignore the rules completely. Now, historians totally debate this as just a traditional story rather than a proven historical fact, but the famous 1823 origin of rugby claims that during a regular old football match, a player named William Webb Ellis just picked up the ball and ran with it. Whether that's actual historical fact or just a legendary myth, it perfectly captures that wild spirit of how trying something totally different can accidentally create an entirely new international sport. So let's look at section 4, mashups and mutations.
Picture 1950s California. Surfers obviously loved riding the ocean waves, but they wanted to get that exact same feeling on land on the days when the water was flat. So what did they do? They adapted. They just took some wheels, slapped them on the wooden boards, and took to the pavement. They basically invented skateboarding. What literally started as a makeshift way to go land surfing is now, remarkably, an Olympic sport. Just incredible.
But of course, innovators soon got way more ambitious.
By the late 20th century, extreme athletes over in the US, Hawaii, and Europe created what I like to call the kite surfing equation. They took the board you'd use for surfing, mixed it with the towing aspect of wakeboarding, and then combined that with literal kite flying. The result? The extreme sport of kite surfing. It's honestly the perfect example of taking three completely different, totally unrelated activities and synthesizing them into one absolute adrenaline-pumping sport.
And then, oh man, we have one of the greatest accidental sports stories of modern times. Back in 1965 on Bainbridge Island, Washington, some families had a problem. They just wanted a fun game using whatever random equipment was lying around the yard. The solution? They decided to mash together elements of tennis, badminton, and table tennis. The result of that lazy afternoon was pickleball, a game that has absolutely exploded into one of the fastest growing sports globally, literally invented just to keep some families from getting bored. When you really step back and look at this history all together, you see this super clear, uninterrupted thread of human ingenuity. We can trace it all the way from that 1823 rugby myth, right through the indoor winter escape of basketball, to surfing on the pavement in the 50s, all the way up to the massive pickleball explosion of 1965. It's literally just a timeline of people trying to have some fun and accidentally changing the world in the process. This perfectly sets up our final section, Section 5, the spirit of innovation.
Okay, before we finish up, let's do a quick little quiz to see what you remember from this explainer. I want you to think back a few minutes. Which famous recreational sport began simply with people tossing around empty pie tins? Do you have your guess locked in?
Well, if you guessed Frisbee, you are exactly right. It started with literal baking tins and turned into a recreational sport loved all around the world. These brilliant little accidents teach us some seriously incredible values about creativity, teamwork, and problem solving. I mean, the ultimate lesson here is that you should absolutely never be afraid to try something totally new, to experiment, or to just look at everyday, boring objects a little differently. As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with this one final provocative thought. If some discarded pie tins, a dusty stack of old books, and a couple of peach baskets can create global, multi-million-dollar sporting phenomenons, what in the world will you invent with what's around you today? Keep experimenting, keep playing, and I'll see you in the next explainer.